Danylchuk has been creating a war diary since the early days of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022. Anna aims to tell the truth about Ukraine and Russia's war and cut out the noise and propaganda. Anna is passionate about the beauty and independence of her country and, of course, communicates, as you will have seen, communicates this incredibly powerfully in her videos in a clear and honest way. Welcome to Silicon Curtain. Please like, subscribe, and of course, comment against the videos. Comments are super important to help these videos perform in YouTube and help new people discover the incredible guests that we feature. Also, do check out the validated Ukrainian charities. It is massively important at this time to make sure that Ukraine gets the support it needs, especially some of the charities here that help veterans, and this is something we touch upon a lot. It's an incredibly important area, and Ukraine has a lot of veterans with various degrees of physical and psychological trauma. Anna, I'm always delighted to have these conversations. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. I feel so good on your channel, and thank you, Jonathan, for creating this wonderful community of people and being a strong voice in support of Ukraine and actually democracy worldwide.
I think it's incredibly important, and what I struggle with, because I think there might be some fairly difficult themes in this conversation, I struggle to understand how, Ukrainian democracy, Maidan revolution, the processes that have been going on in Ukraine, and now the resilience that Ukraine is showing against onslaught by Russia in every sphere, informational, sea, land, air, they're attacking using everything. And Ukraine is developing capabilities of resilience to fight off with varying degrees of success in all of those areas. What I cannot understand is why so many people still don't realize how important this struggle is, and the fact that it's just not a regional struggle. It's not just a struggle over resources or land or these kind of things. It's an existential struggle for the values of democracy themselves. What's your perspective, though, because you're in Ukraine and you're much closer to, to the danger line?
Thank you so much for this question. Indeed, sometimes I think and put the same question to myself, because Russia does a lot of evil on a daily basis. Just yesterday, they have targeted the center of Chernihiv, a densely populated district, killing many. And I always hate saying the number because, unfortunately, typically hours after the attack, it grows. Russia uses double taps, which is almost a forbidden war strategy, and many other things. And all those sane people who have eyes know Russia is evil. But unfortunately, many choose to turn a blind eye on or something. And I think it's in general, this is a typical human behavior as we are trying to protect our mind, our soul from all this evil. One of your guests, Peter Pomerantsev, in an interview for our documentary said a good phrase that also works for me to explain the situation, that quite often when people encounter something very evil, something that can be equal to this biblical description of evil, and they don't know what can they do to stop it or to counterfight it on this personal level, they decide to avoid thinking about that, to pretend it did not happen because they realize they cannot stop it. But all of our life proves this is a very wrong approach. I can compare Russia to a very deadly disease. It was typical, by the way, in political communication for ages to compare states to human body and problems that it encounters to various diseases. And Russia is a cancer of the democratic world, and it spreads. And any patient learning about this disease does not want this knowledge, wants to avoid, wants to imagine it's something different. It's a misdiagnosis. But then a stage of acceptance and understanding comes, and a person starts fighting. That's the only way. And why help is so important at a certain stage, because only at a certain stage you still have time to save, help. And that's why Ukraine is shouting for this support. But also Russia and Russian evil spreads just like cancer to other locations, causing other symptoms. They may be different. It may not be a tank on a square, but it may be a chaos in a parliament, which will also lead to lots of troubles for a particular country. And just as with a bad diagnosis, many people choose to escape and pretend it's not happening, but still, at a certain moment, they don't have a choice left and they have to fight back. So for Ukraine, it's not the case only of bravery or resilience, it is the case of understanding. It is about our existence in general, about our survival. And when you understand the price, you start fighting, and like what other options? Well, once again, a very important thing to understand is if war ends on Russian terms in Ukraine, this does not mean deaths will end in Ukraine or tragedies will end in Ukraine and we will enter a phase of so-called peace. No. Look at what is happening on the temporarily occupied territories where people are in filtration camps, separated from their children, or even mobilized to Russian army. There are lots of war crimes happening, and of course, people who are active citizens, people who actually spread common for our democratic world ideas, disappear, tortured in cellars. This is happening right now. And once again, many people are scared of these things and they want to hide and distract themselves, but it does not work like that. When a patient gets some worrisome symptoms, hiding from them will not help the symptoms disappear.
There's two areas I want to go in with that. Let's first talk about the depths of the crimes, because I think it's actually incredibly important to understand that, as you say, if you fully embrace the really incredibly terrible nature of the crimes that are being committed and the scale they're being committed at, if you really embrace that, you would have to take it seriously, and you'd have to make a change in your foreign policy, your economy. Essentially, the West would be on a war footing already if it took those crimes seriously. So I think there's a reason, one, why for an individual it's too terrible to contemplate, but for a government, there are huge responsibilities and implications for fully embracing, accepting it. Do you think that to an extent we are still letting Russia off the hook? We're letting Russia off the hook because our leaders understand there would be a huge price and a huge responsibility that would come with fully recognizing what Russia is and what it's done and what it is doing on a daily basis in Ukraine.
Yes, unfortunately. Global leaders still do not treat Russia as an illegal formation at this moment, as a terrorist state. Many observing reactions to other conflicts in the world say that global leaders still do not associate Russia with this axis of evil, and they still think it's a negotiable country, something can be done, and Putin is still named president in many news, which is not okay. Because Russia has done so much to demonstrate its true nature. Russia has invaded a number of independent countries, breaking all international laws and demonstrating, oh, this United Nations, this other standards, they are not working. So to a great extent, Russia has already undermined the very existence of these documents, of these agreements, and of these organizations. Then it continued, it started with Georgia, then continued to Ukraine, more problems in Moldova. It multiplies these quasi-republics that are not accepted by world countries, but still they exist in Ruski Mir. No reaction. Then it annexed Crimea, and what happened? The world decided not to escalate. I don't know how on earth can we escalate if it is Russia who constantly escalates? The fact that Western governments do not want to start war with Russia does not mean that Russia has not started this war against them already. Changing their course without their knowing, by financing various people, buying decisions, and getting deep inside European or US structures. They've been doing it since the times of the Cold War. They have lots of contents and lots of tools. And when the world was growing more normal, more tolerant, more people-loving, Russia was doing the contrary. And that's why one of the good reasons why many people still do not accept this pure evil of Russia is they are too kind, too good, living in normal environments. They cannot accept such evil as possible, and they are looking for all the other explanations when they do not actually exist. What Russia does in Ukraine every day is a pure crime. And you know, after this attack in Moscow, which actually Russia does not investigate at all, and we see how much it does not care about its own people. I had lots of my subscribers letting me know they brought flowers to the embassy of Russia to demonstrate their sympathy, and that's okay. They are people who feel, people who care for human lives. But I had this sarcastic comment, I would say, that perhaps all the embassies of Ukraine are covered with flowers up to the roof, because every day such attacks happen. And yesterday in Chernihiv, today it may happen elsewhere. And it's not okay that the world is getting used to that. And these numbers are just numbers. And emotions are, like yesterday, I felt very emotional. I've read a comment on Facebook. Someone shared a status that a family with a daughter was hiding during an air attack in Kharkiv. And you know, Kharkiv is very heavily shelled right now. And the girl asked her parents that if she dies in this attack, please name your next daughter just as me. And hopefully this girl will survive and live her life. But can you imagine what should happen in minds of all people, including children, when they produce such messages and they seem already normal for them? I do understand why she's saying that. I do understand it's real. And these children are just like British children or US children or French children. They are well educated. They know how to behave. They love teddy bears. They are not some kind of evil, dark, different. And what bothers me, yes, that people around the world know about that, but they still desperately try to find some things in Russia that will permit them. There is no more this old world. There is no more old world order. And Russia started ruining it. And to survive this battle, we have to open our eyes and to speak that we see this and we treat it as it should be treated, not as a legal country anymore. Putin is not a president of Russia. Putin is not negotiable, and Lavrov is not a minister. This is a gang of war criminals creating mass killings, if not genocide, in Ukraine, similar to Hitler, Goebbels, and other stuff.
And this is
at the moment, sorry, I'm finishing. At the moment when we accept that, and this becomes new world understanding, the war will end.
And I think that normalization is one of the real problems. Now, we'll come to the topic of negotiation in a minute, because normalizing Russia and downplaying its crimes unfortunately leads to very poor decision making, and it leads to poor strategic choices. But I do think people genuinely underestimate the problem posed by Russia, because, you know, they'll hark back to, let's say, classic propaganda and some historical detail. They'll say, well, the Soviet Union was our ally in the Second World War. You know, we couldn't have defeated Nazism without Soviet troops. They'll also repeat, classic sort of Russian talking points is, yes, but they lost so many people. Of course, the reality is far more complex, that actually it was Ukraine and Belarus that was far more devastated than Russia, mainland itself. The extraordinarily high death rate amongst Russian or USSR soldiers was because of the strategies, the incompetence, the corruption, the nepotism, the idiocy, and the sheer brutality against their own forces. So there are certain details that get left out of this fairly simplistic picture. And even now, I think I try to use models to explain or get people to imagine what Russia is as an entity. And one of those is to say, well, look, Africa, Africa with its potential and its problems, but it's many, many states. If you sit down and you try to list all the different countries in Africa, I think you'd have a challenge there, because there are many and they're extremely diverse. So I use the example, Russia, it is as if the Nazi SS had survived the war and now runs a territory the size of Africa. This is Russia. Its incredible diversity of nationalities and populations are entirely papered over, covered over, hidden by propaganda. And the KGB, FSB is the SS. It is no less evil and pernicious. The only difference between the SS and Russia is that Russia survived the Second World War as a victor and Nazi Germany didn't.
Jonathan, I often quote you in my videos, in my conversations, and thank you once again for this very vivid explanation indeed. Now, the more I learn our own history, and it's such a tragedy when your own history was hidden from the generations of your countrymen. This is already an evil in itself and would have been enough of a problem for an ordinary EU country, for example. I feel very sad and very tragic about this period when Iron Curtain was put on my part of the world, and people who were tired after the Second World War decided, let them decide it. It's Eastern Europe and so on. You are very right about this Nazi Germany running the territory the size of Africa with different peoples. And when we pay so much attention to diversity and freedom of development of many different cultures, it's insane how we close our eyes and don't care about this dozens, if not hundreds of peoples who now disappear inside Russia. Russia is a prison of the peoples. But when you were saying it, I was thinking about that similar situation. Would it be possible, like the world continues closing the eyes during the Second World War, and for example, Nazi regime survives, and so on? I think that we cannot unsee, we could not unsee the crimes of the Nazis, and it's still boiled. And even if it would lead to some years of appeasement, it would anyway burst and it could not survive. And I think modern Russian Federation cannot survive too. Because even those people who are still afraid, even those people who still want negotiations, they have already seen it and they cannot unsee it. And Russia will continue getting worse. It will not freeze. It will not postpone for 50 years. So we have to accept that it is happening, and it is our generation that has to fight and end it. It will not dissolve by itself. It's not the kind of evil, it's not the kind of conflict that we can postpone. So I believe that this size of evil already created by them has already outweighed a possibility to neutralize it somehow. Unfortunately, there are lots of cowards, there are lots of people who are afraid of making decisions, and somehow often decision makers are the ones who don't like making decisions. But we should not underestimate people. What I feel here in Ukraine is the enormous support of ordinary people. I call myself an ordinary Ukrainian, and there are lots of ordinary Brits, lots of ordinary Americans, Frenchmen who are way stronger than their leaders. But actually, countries are made of people, not of a bunch of Mike Johnsons. We do have to continue fighting, continue surviving. Unfortunately, it's very difficult at a very high price, but we don't have other choice. And I'm sure that all the sane world will still unite in that, because I don't see Putin back to normality on some forums. I think it's impossible.
I think so. I mean, in a future episode, I'll be examining the idea that we are actually already in World War III, whether we know it or not.
I think we are, because if we like, the World War is already the World War when other countries are involved, not particularly militarily. And we know that, like, China supports Russia. We know that North Korea supplies Russia. We know that Iran is on their side. So we may definitely see these are Russian allies. And we may say thank you to the countries who support Ukraine. So we have already taken their sides. And it's also important to understand that if, I hope never, but if Ukraine loses, it is also the failure of the West and our allies. And Russia will treat it as a failure and will continue doing it with whatever it wants with losers. It is already like that. It's not that you can say, like, oh, we did not care. Well, I don't know, what was that? No. Once again, we cannot unsee, we cannot unsay, we cannot forget what was done. If political leaders may imitate this amnesia, how do you call it? Then people won't.
Well, there's two topics I want to come to next. One is about the information space and Ukraine, and we're talking about resilience, we're talking about areas of Russian aggression, and of course there is always the focus on the physical aggression, but actually the resources and the toxicity it puts into fighting the information war is no less than the physical war. In fact, more so, according to the Russian military doctrine, because that is a more efficient form of aggression. And in the West, in recent years, we've introduced the idea of coercive control. So if you have an abusive partner, and there are certain recognized psychological as well as physical techniques where a partner can abuse and control their wife, spouse, or even husband, because it can work both ways, although typically the man will be the controlling one, but there are examples of both. So we recognize that in the individual or familial setting, the idea of coercive control. We find it far more difficult to extrapolate that out into the whole information sphere and see that what Russia does through active measures and its various manipulations and information aggression is a form of coercive control. Ukraine has been developing, let's say, some resilience in that sphere, certain techniques and legislation. It seems that the US, especially their information environment, does not have the same immune system, does not have the same protections or structure, and it makes it very, let's say, open to Russian disinformation. So again, from your perspective, what do we need to do in the West to really take seriously the threat to our media and information environment?
It's difficult because Russia definitely has the first army in the world that works in this informational field. Or starting from even technical parts like hackers attack, or leaking letters and other stuff, finishing with very simple bot farms, troll farms that are active on social media. And of course, also buying or influencing strong voices that are trusted inside different societies. And once again, what makes many countries vulnerable to that is their normal history, normal life, normal development, living far away from such powers as Russia, from such evil. They have no idea how low it can fall and how bad it can be. And from one point of view, you're lucky that you have never encountered that. But from the other point of view, it's just like, you know, it can be compared to indigenous people of Latin America that died out because of simple European diseases that were common for our bodies. What you cannot learn that much as we did decades next to Russia, decades inside Soviet Union. So no course will help that. No media literacy campaign will help that. Plus, we see from internal Russian documents like their foreign policy doctrine and so on, that they have very professional approach to that, even definitely more professional to the battlefield strategies. They adapt very quickly. It's always easy to catch the problems that exist inside a particular society and then to play on these problems, to dwell on them, use them as they need. So to some extent, you cannot prepare the world that quickly. But what we can, and in comparison, for example, to Nazi Germany, they have lots of platforms right now, starting from social media, television, opinion leaders, it all spreads so quickly. Then once again, we return to this very important decision that the world should take, saying that Russia is evil, condemning everything, not treating it as a real country, and stopping narratives like we have to listen to the both sides. Believe me, Hitler also had his arguments. If someone would listen to him, no, because he is a killer. The same is about Putin. He is a killer responsible for the deaths of thousands. He is a person who ruined the modern world order. He is the person responsible for higher prices or some problems that you have inside society, not Ukraine who wants to survive, but he. And when we start treating Russia as 100% terrorist country, we do not listen to what terrorists say. We prevent any presence of them on our TV channel. You cannot imagine Al-Qaeda people speaking about their religious virtues on a TV channel. No, no, no. They don't get this microphone. They lose this opportunity when they cross the lines set up by mankind. Russia did that 100 times, crossed the borders, threw away red flags. It's obvious. One Bucha is enough. It's awful. Like, it is already enough for a tragedy of a country for centuries to speak about that. And in Ukraine, it happens on a weekly basis. And when we finally agree that Russia is not negotiable, we cannot talk, listen, discuss, analyze, or try to find something normal there. We simply need to defeat, take Putin and go to The Hague, and then start serious processes inside zombified Russian society. And only then we can start listening to them, their sides, and so on. But right now, it is total block. Because fighting with that specific strategies for each country, they are very different. For the US, for the UK, for France, or for African continent, they are all very, very different. And the only way to stop that in this emergent time when bombs are falling on Ukrainian houses is to simply turn off any volume for Russia.
That's it. And to recognize where, because it's not just direct Russian voices, it's also their assets, their agents, and they amplify through third parties. Now, we talked about Tucker Carlson, I think, on our last. He's definitely part of that ecosystem that Russia tries to create. Just this week, we have another narrative. Now, some people say, well, hang on a second, you know, not everyone is a Russian asset. No, not everyone is consciously a Russian asset, but some people do align themselves with Russian talking points. Some people for their own benefit, whether it's their own grift, their own income, their own sort of source of status, and you know, what they get paid to do, they will carve out for themselves a particular point of view, a contrarian point of view. And often contrarian point of views have an extraordinary coincidence with narratives that are either directly beneficial to the Kremlin or indirectly. And we see one of those coming up this week, and it's with the topic of negotiation, because you've been observing a huge upswing in troll comments. and this narrative around negotiation. And just this week, we've got a major academic study that's getting a lot of traction in the foreign policy press, and it is a study that looks at the transcripts of the so-called negotiations, peace negotiations in Istanbul in 2022. And of course, one of the classic Russian propaganda narratives is that Russia was peaceful, and seeking peace, and trying to find a way through. It's trying to normalize or rationalize Russia as a negotiation partner, when in fact its actions in Irpin, Bucha, indeed its actions throughout the Minsk Accords, suggest that it is not a good faith actor. And on the one hand, it'll do this puppet show of negotiation. On the other hand, you have to look at its physical actions. Well, this academic study has come out, and it very much tries to normalize Russia as a rational negotiating partner. And I don't think the timing is accidental. So what are you seeing around negotiation and the talking point, the Kremlin talking point, and what does it mean? What are they actually trying to achieve by bringing this up?
You are right in these observations that there are seasons when such ideas appear, and they appear on different levels, starting from high academic circles that can influence opinions of presidents, ministers, and defense institutions, and finishing with ordinary trolls that will divert, distort the opinion of people watching the video or reading the tweet. As a Ukrainian, I try to be optimistic. Well, we need to survive, and that's the way. And I try to see it as a signal of something good coming for Ukraine. That there may be a good shift in this war and the support of our allies, and that Russia feels that coming, realizes it will change the situation greatly, and tries to prevent it with all possible means. And that's when they finance more and more of such opinions, trying to persuade, like, oh no, no way to help Ukraine, and so on. The problem is that such people as Tucker Carlson, or many, many more voices that are respected inside their societies, followed, and so on, are still able to speak about Russia as a legitimate country once again. I cannot imagine Tucker Carlson taking an interview with Hitler and trying to show what does the other side think. Once again, because at a certain moment of time, it was enough determination and strength in the allies to condemn Nazi regime and to never look for any excuses or reasons, because this is pure evil. The same, once again, if it was done, and it should have been already done in relation to Russia, when we say it is a terrorist state at the moment, it cannot be listened to, negotiated with, and so on. None of these journalists or academicians, even previously financed or, I don't know, by nature loving Russian world, would continue doing it. Just as no one tries to legitimize anything about Nazi regime. The same should be done about Russia. People will definitely care for their careers, life, and so on. It is not. That's why they can bring up these topics, because still there are lots of leaders that will shake hands with Putin, and we may see even the head of the United Nations doing that. So why on earth shouldn't they? So we haven't achieved this real isolation of Russia when it is all alone, even with its evil authoritarian partners. It is not alone even in the Western world, still in the democratic world. There will be people coming, shaking hands, and so on. If the world stood united against it, saying Russia is a criminal terrorist country, then Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary would be afraid to travel and speak. That's what we should do, and it's not that expensive for taxpayers. And negotiations, of course, are impossible, just as they were impossible with the Nazi Germany, once again. First of all, Russia is not a rational country. A rational country would never attack another independent country. openly with no reasons. Then you are very correct in saying we should analyze actions. Actions always speak louder than words. Russia attacked, Russia crossed the borders, Russia shelled every Ukrainian city. We did not do that. We are, even in this full-scale war, we are not allowed to target like the majority of things in Russia, and we don't do that. Why? Because we obey the rules. Russia broke that with no reason. Now, a Russian missile crosses the border of Poland, which is a NATO country. First of all, Russia tests NATO. Second, Russia demonstrates to China and other things, NATO is not working. Look what we're doing. I don't know why people think Russians don't feel that way. They do. They are making it as a test. They really well know they have broken the law. They really well know Poland has all the rights to shut down their missile. It's not even an aircraft with people in it. It's a missile. They can shut it down because it spent 39 seconds on a NATO territory, but it doesn't. Why? They don't want to escalate. They are very much afraid that their actions can lead to a greater war. Russia was not afraid to escalate. Let's face it, Russia was the one to cross the borders and cross the lines. So it cannot be described as rational anyway. Any of its actions were irrational. And then, after so many crimes committed, after so many agreements broken, it has lost this option, just as a murderer who promises, okay, I will stop killing women. It doesn't work like that. It has to get to jail, or maybe even a death sentence is an option. The same about Russia. Such things cannot be forgotten. And once again, we have to remember, in many of his speeches, Putin says there is no end to Russian borders. And it's not a metaphor, it's a plan for the future.
And when I hear, through various sources, amplification of this negotiation theme, it's clear that Russia is putting a lot of effort and resources into the normalization of the idea that it can be a rational negotiation partner. It is activating a lot of its assets and agents and informal networks to get that message across, as well as the troll factories which are directly, paid and resourced by it. That therefore leaves the question, why is it doing it? Because if we put aside the idea that it wants genuine negotiations, let's look at what the reasons could be that it's doing that at this time. And I come to two conclusions based on what it's done in previous circumstances. One is to convince the West that it is rational, and therefore we should, as you say, normalize it and not treat it as a terrorist outcast. Therefore, we should not take the appropriate steps to punish it and deal with it. A subtopic of that is that if we believe it's a rational negotiation partner that generally wants to negotiate, then that would help to delay the provision of offensive munitions to Ukraine. So there's potential there that strategically they're trying to delay Western help. And they've used this over and over. The entire Minsk Accords was a system really created by Russia to prevent Western support for Ukraine. That's what it was all about. It wasn't to keep the peace. It was to really put a lid on Western support. Again, escalation management. The third possibility is that Russia genuinely wants negotiations to freeze the conflict at the moment so that it can rearm and come back with greater escalation in a year, 2 years, whenever it happens to be. So these are some of the potential strategic, I think, reasons. I don't know if you can think of any more. And how should we deal with this? Because it seems that if we take this negotiation, this rationalization of negotiation, and we take that as genuine, then that could lead to some extremely poor decision-making in Western capitals.
It will definitely lead to very poor and dangerous decision making, and it will definitely get very bad consequences for these countries, including who will support the idea of negotiations. You have described these potential reasons for Russia wanting the negotiations very beautifully, and I actually think it is a combination of all. Once again, from Russian informational strategy, foreign policy, and their so-called diplomacy, we see they are very adaptive. And they have realized that this war did not go according to plan A, B, C, and so on. And they change these plans constantly. And they may think of different options possible, different changes in policy, and so on. And they try to be ready for everything here. So, reason number one, of course, they are tired, they are exhausted. Some this troll come and say, oh, Ukraine is constantly asking for weapons. If you cannot finish them with your own weapons, then you should surrender, and so on. Well, first of all, many countries helped us demilitarize heavily and took responsibilities when inspired us to do so. Second, we are standing not just for Ukraine. And third, even loved by them, Mother Russia asks for supply from China, from Iran, from North Korea, and has already received a lot of the supplies from other countries. So Russia is not fighting with its own potential only. It even recruits lots of people from other countries abroad, and so on. So
And should we list out in the Second World War? I mean, the Second World War, let's list all the Western equipment that the USSR got to defeat Nazi Germany. I mean, that's...
Yeah. And even now here we see that Russia already uses and the potential of its allies, or I don't know if authoritarian regimes have allies, but Russia is using China, Russia is using North Korea, and they supply it with everything it needs. So we may say officially that both parties in this war need support from other parties. No one is fighting independently. And that is really cool of Ukraine being much smaller than Russia in size in times of Soviet heritage, military heritage, and so on. So they do need a break. They do need to mobilize people. They need to get more supplies because perhaps every third missile that they produce in crazy shifts is destroyed. Also, they may use this pause, this imitation of peace to try and break off some sanctions. There are lots of businesses waiting to return back to Russia or to cooperate with Russia. They may use it as like, look, we're not fighting anymore, return, and many will. Thus bringing more money to Russia and helping her rearm sooner. It will definitely continue this war, because why on earth not? If after so many crimes, after so many broken agreements, after so much humiliation to NATO and other countries, they are not stopped. Why should they not continue that? For Russia, it is an existential reason. They have lots of troubles inside. They cannot solve these troubles, and they need wars outside. That's how they explain their problems, and that's how they keep their population motivated. Okay, so for them, war non-stop is a good thing, but with some small breaks for a year or two or even 5. Look at Crimea. Those advisors of negotiations. The world made us, to some extent, not escalate. Many accepted that. Some global services even added Crimea to the Russian map, which is totally legal, but still. We did not escalate. Everyone will say we did not escalate at all. And what did it lead us to? Continuation of this war, more hunger from Russia. So definitely they may use it as a pause to rearm, to rebuild new contacts, to demonstrate allies, I mean Russian allies, that look, NATO is not strong enough, they are not united, we do whatever we want, so we can start an even larger. I think that every next wave of Russian aggression will be definitely stronger. Just as it was like first Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, then all of Ukraine, then maybe all of the former Soviet Union that they want to restore, and then up to the plans of Putin and his co-dictators. So they definitely want to use this time to rearm, to mobilize, and perhaps to try and negotiate disappearance of some sanctions. And there are countries, unfortunately, and businesses that are waiting for that. And of course, this is also a message to the world that, like, stop making Ukraine strong, and maybe we will stop then if we see that Ukraine is neutral. You know, sometimes I get silly questions like, why Ukraine could not be like Switzerland, neutral? Why have you decided? Well, Switzerland does not have a neighbor like that. I don't see anyone wanting to swallow Switzerland, break its independence, and make it live in Ruski Mir. There is a huge difference between the position of Switzerland and Ukraine. We cannot have this privilege of being neutral. We don't have this luxury. We have to protect our right to speak our language, to live on our territories and according to our rules, have our elections, our politicians, and so on. So definitely they feel, and that's what I try to motivate myself with from the Ukrainian perspective, that this number of narratives about negotiations or rationality of Russia or troll comments appearing on the channels are as a symptom that maybe Ukraine will get some aid and will be able to answer in the only possible way to Russia, in a military way. So negotiate, and what makes me feel proud is that no matter who is the president of the United States or who is the head of NATO or what parties come to the European Parliament, I am 100% confident that Ukraine will not accept negotiations with Russia.
I think that's absolutely true, and that's absolutely the right thing to do. And all we can do, you know, on this channel, on the platforms and forums that we've got, is explain why Russia is not a good faith negotiator. And the last question, and it really feeds off this, because I've thought of another scenario of why Russia is pushing the negotiation narrative right now. And this is because Ukraine, I think, has hit across a very powerful strategy. Russia is sending glide bombs to kill civilians. These are 1-ton sort of, you know, gliding, floating bombs, very crude, indirect. So we know what Russia does. Through its actions, we know that it kills civilians and it has no real military strategy. Ukraine, on the other hand, has hit upon an extraordinary strategy, and that is to use precision long-range drones to hit Russian oil refining capacity. It now has the capability, if Ukraine chose to do so, to hit Russian crude export facilities, pipelines as well. They haven't done that, but those options are there. And I think this has really freaked out the the tyrants in the Kremlin. They understand that if Ukraine were to continue this strategy, and they very much need to, and they need to ignore US pressure to stop, this could destroy Russia's war machine. This could prevent and further growth or increase or intensification of Russian aggression, and it simply wouldn't have the resources to do that. So this is a smart strategy. It is enforcing oil sanctions in a way that Western oil sanctions have not worked up until now. So this is another reason why Russia may be pushing the negotiation narrative, which is, if Ukraine carries on hitting our oil facilities, then we won't negotiate with you in future. And it's dangling this fictitious possibility of negotiations as a way to put pressure on Ukraine to stop doing what I think is a war-winning strategy.
Thank you. I loved it how you named that sanctions. Perhaps I will use that on my channel, like some active sanctions from Ukraine.
The
Drone
only
sanctions.
sanctions that work, yes.
Yeah, it did. Because once again, of course, sanctions do give an important thing to the general resilience, but they did not work the way we expected, because the plan was Russia does not have any options to continue the war and stops. It doesn't. It switched to a military industry, switched to a military economy, and it continues producing missiles that it later sends to Ukraine. And I think that why we've managed to develop this strategy and use it successfully with very limited resources is the reason because we want to see Russia defeated. We want Russia to lose. When all of our allies will decide that they also want to see Russia defeated and Russia lose, we can end this war once again really quickly. I hate to hear from the mouths of global leaders words like, we don't let Ukraine lose, but no one says we need to see Russia defeated. Or, for example, America will never participate in this war. How on earth do you know? Are you sure they will not attack you? By saying it, you're actually showing like, okay, do whatever. It's so wrong. Even if you don't plan to do it, don't say it. I don't know why are they doing it, and it definitely irritates me. And when you have this, we need to have this decision to see Russia defeated, not stopped, not frozen, not negotiated, not partially isolated to make their rich children feel uncomfortable in Paris, but still in Paris. We need to see Russia defeated. And to do so, we need to use all legitimate ways. And targeting their oil refineries is definitely a legitimate way. This was something advised to Ukraine back in 2022 when we did not have this drones. It's kind of funny. They advise you to do it when they know you don't have resources to do it, because you're not allowed to target long-range missiles to Russia, and you don't have your own long-range missiles. So you could have done it, but we know you won't. Then you start thinking, how can I do it without breaking the rules? I don't know who set these rules, but anyway, set the rules that were set, and you create a drone that is capable of doing that. And you start doing what your allies advised you, and then they still, no, according to a plan, you could not. We all know that in the Second World War, it was one of the winning strategies to undermine German economy and also their oil refineries, and they were bombed like crazy by the Allies. Why on earth did it change? Because the prices went higher. Well, first of all, Ukraine is not to blame. The majority of oil is produced in Kazakhstan and elsewhere. Unfortunately, we have not led to this problem that far, so the prices to rise. But we have Saudis who influence the prices. We have lots of American Republicans who can close some of the oil stuff for repayments or other stuff, causing higher prices. We have
And Houthis in the Red Sea,
Houthis.
proxies of Iran, and Iran is
Yeah,
an ally of
and
who?
it's so
Russia.
kind of sad that like huge countries, NATO countries, can do nothing to Hussites. It's difficult for me as a Ukrainian to understand why. And these Hussites that changed the route of oil and so on actually caused these higher prices, not Ukrainians. But even if we look at the root of this all, it is Russia to blame for these prices. So as soon as we defeat Russia, have a new government there, new people, maybe new democratic countries appearing, we will have better prices. That's the only way. Otherwise, Russia will continue manipulating with everything, starting from global security and nuclear attacks on your cities and finishing with prices in your supermarkets. If we allow it, so the only way to end it is to end modern Russian regime.
And enable Ukraine to do it, because no one is in a better position to end the Russian aggression than Ukraine itself.
We are kind of ready. Once again, don't think about that as giving money to a Ukraine that is begging. It is investment in your future better prices, if you are that much about prices.
That's an incredibly powerful place to end. Anna, I massively appreciate you spending time every month to share your wisdom and insights with the channel. I think it's incredibly important that people really understand these ideas, and there is no one better than you at explaining them. So thank you so much, and Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for all you and your beautiful community does to support Ukraine, and together we will win.